No one else noticed. No one else noticed.
Well, I can't do it if you've got party members not here.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Council Business Planning Committee of the Whole budget meeting of November 21st, 2017 to order. I see that all members of Council are here. Staff this evening, at the presenters table, we have our CAO, Mr. Mike Kirkopoulos, and beside him we have our Director of Finance and Administration, Angela Safani. To my right, our intrepid clerk, Director of Corporate Services, and William Colossa. At the staff table, we've got Mr. Dave Graham, who is our Director of Public Works, Ms. Kathleen Dale, who's our Director of Planning and Development, Chief Greg Hudson. Beside Chief, we've got Maria Brigantino, who is our Director of Community Services. In the front row, we've got Carrie Beatty, who's the Senior Communications Advisor, and Mr. Paul Deaney, our Economic Development Officer. Mr. John Brown, who is Manager IT Services. And in the back row, we have Rosalie Potter, our Manager of Revenue, and we've got Terry Trewalla, our Associate Director / Financial Analyst. And in the front row, we've got Jill Nicholson from the library, who's the Chief Executive Officer, and we've also got the Vice Chair of Library Board, Donna Burton. So welcome. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? I see none. Confirmation of the agenda. Do any members have any changes to the order of business detailed in tonight's agenda? Pretty straightforward. Okay. We have no delegations this evening, and we have no items of correspondence. So let's delve right into the 2018 operating budget. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to our CAO and Director of Finance and Administration to provide a presentation to assist in guiding our 2018 operating budget deliberations this evening and bringing back the questions and queries that we had the other night. Mr. CAO.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity again to be before Council and to present the 2018 operating budget, followed by our water and wastewater budget. Just to give Council a little bit of a recap, we've been in front of you, as I said at the last meeting, a number of times, making this much more of a year-long process, and a process that I think tries to share with Council information much earlier than just the typical budget cycle as we head into the last part of the year. We've been in front of you May 17th of this year, where we talked about budget planning, we talked about themes, we gave you an overview of the senior levels of government and the framework and landscape that they're operating by and the decisions they're making. We shared with you some new information on demographics. We talked about a budget schedule, and at that point in time, we also talked about the type of engagement strategy we were looking to develop over the summer and as part of our visioning work to reach out to residents. September 20th, we presented the 10-year capital plan and gave Council an introduction to the capital budget. October 30th, we were in front of you talking about the capital budget and providing you an overview, at which time we highlighted some of the business drivers to the capital program. Again, we gave you a little bit of information around the local landscape and what we're seeing. We talked about the 2018 capital budget overview and why we had looked at a smaller list of projects than maybe we had in past years. They were more substantial projects, but projects we wanted to get started and made sure we were completed. November 8th, we continued with the capital budget and provided an introduction to the operating budget. There were some Council inquiries that were posed to us on October 30th regarding the capital program. and those are highlighted below. What we were asked to come back with, and I think this highlights one of the questions that Councillor Foster had yesterday, was specifically around water and wastewater and the information there. The meter program we were looking at, I think it was Councillor Thompson that had some questions on that and some suggestions. We brought back a list of the outstanding capital projects. Councillor McPherson and a number of councillors had highlighted some information on what were those outstanding capital projects and our plan for moving them forward. We talked about our funding process and the carry forward project process that's in place in terms of projects that aren't completed. How do those move forward? We brought some information back on the LED program, specifically related to Heritage Village. We talked about the Parks and Facilities Master Plan and how that would start as soon as we received approval. And that would really be the program and the plan that would dictate how we would do parks moving forward. And Chief Hudson provided information on our apparatus replacement within the fire department and some of the parameters and decision-making he uses on those items. November 15th, moving forward with our budget planning recap, we gave you an overview of the operating budget. We talked about budget pressures, budget considerations, and we introduced the departmental budgets. Tonight we're in front of you, once again, sharing with you some of the council inquiries and follow-ups we had from November 15th. We've prepared a tax levy scenario for council consideration. And we're going to be introducing, as I said earlier, the 2018 water and wastewater budget and rates. So tonight's agenda, a brief introduction, follow-up, the budget scenarios as I highlighted, and then water and wastewater, as well as some next steps. We will be in front of council 2 more times in December, one hopefully to approve our budget, and the other one to ratify. But again, should council have any questions, we can make sure we bring them back at that appropriate time. So again, this is a slide that you've seen me present now a number of times. It really talks about, and I think it is an important message, since 2006 we have averaged 4.01% in terms of an average tax increase. And I always look at numbers and try to figure out what does that say. Growth and development has continued in our community, and our budget increases have really been focused on maintaining the current operating needs. We've had limited accommodation for that growth and economic development, and I think it's an important point to make. I think, for a number of reasons, if we think about the global economic recession in 2008 and how long it took this province and the country to get out of that, this was an appropriate level investment in the community. It does mean that now we're playing a little bit of catch up, and again, I think council has heard me say that we continue to want to invest in the basics, but change does come at a cost, and we are trying to incrementally make the both short and long-term investments that are required to ensure sustainability in the community. I said this last time, and I think it's important to highlight council through last year's increase and the year before has demonstrated an investment in the community. Last year was the first year this council focused and invested in a infrastructure levy, 1%. And I think by doing that, you've demonstrated that you're not only looking at this particular term, but what are the long-term community needs. 2018 continues to be a year where we're investing in services. We continue to get those basic services in a healthy place to where we need to deliver on council's priorities. And once again, we are recommending a special infrastructure levy. We had initially come to you with the 1% option, and council had asked us to go back and look at a scenario that included 1.5%. So just a little bit of a recap, and we've called this slide strategic budgeting because I think it's just, it helps council, and I think it helps us focus on the strategic elements of the budget and how we align the budget in our decisions. So we're taking deliberate steps to ensure investment occurs now where it needs to occur. It's kind of that needs versus wants comment that I make a number of times, while at the same time having a longer term outlook. We need to maintain a cost-conscious approach in regard for taxpayers. I think this is something that council's echoed. I know we've got Mr. Jansen here this evening, a number of other constituents that have reached out to me, reached out to members of council that continue, I think, to highlight the importance of that regard for taxpayers and that cost-conscious approach. We continue to align with council priorities: roads, transportation and traffic, communication, economic development, culture and customer service, things that council approved in their future focus document at the beginning of this term. I think it's also important that budgets align to vision. Council, with the community, with staff, with the organization, approved a vision, a place to grow, a place to prosper, and a place to belong. There's regulatory and legislative requirements. I don't think that comes as a surprise. We've all heard about Bill 148. We've heard about equal pay. We've heard about minimum wage and all the implications of those. So on top of that, there's just changing legislation with integrity commissioners, some of the legislative stuff within our legislative services group that just makes the way we do business different, and we need to ensure that we're meeting our obligations. I've highlighted in here focusing on the client. I think it's important that every decision we make holds at the forefront our residents. And what comes to mind when we say that is really customer service and service excellence. As I said before, the desire to invest in the basics. There's basic services municipalities provide, and those are the services that we need to look at first. And then, of course, there's those additional services that we provide that turn municipalities and cities and towns into communities, into places people want to invest, people want to work, people want to play. And of course, you've heard me talk about long-term sustainability and just how investment needs to be both now and in the future. And I've highlighted here just a culture of continuous improvement. I think, you know, a lot of times there's things that we need to do. There's things that we can look at in terms of becoming better in the way we deliver services or the processes we have. That work is starting in the organization. We need to look at outcomes and be outcome focused, outcome based, and our decision making needs to be informed and evidence based. So doing business differently. I think we heard a lot on November 15th about efficiencies. And our staff demonstrating efficiencies. And I can tell you in a number of core areas, if not across the entire organization, and I know I said that fairly emphatically last time, and I'll repeat that. I think as a senior management team, as an organization, we are looking at efficiencies, and we're running what I'm going to say a very efficient administration in terms of what we do. And I can speak a little bit more to the metrics that point to that, at least at a high level. So some of the things that we are doing, number of our departments, but being led from community services, are looking at continuous quality improvement strategies. We're looking at efficiencies, workflow, how we do expenditures. Value for money is something that finance and the departments will be looking at and continue to look at. Our improved customer service, something that all the directors and as an organization, as an extended management team, we continue to hold at the forefront of what we do. We continue to find and look for additional funding opportunities and partnerships. This year we were successful at receiving almost $1 million through the federal government for the Clean Water and Wastewater Fund program, which will help us move a project forward. Accountability, you're going to see, and I think you're going to hear, and you've heard, when we set budgets and targets, our expenditures and revenues, we want to meet them. We don't want to set arbitrary revenue targets and not meet them. We're going to be incredibly aggressive, and we have been in those targets, but we're also going to be conservative and make sure that we meet them. Innovation, the importance of innovation, taking risks, exploring new approaches to operations and service delivery. And of course, continuing to ensure a clear connection between the budget and the strategic plan in terms of where council wants to move and where council wants to focus its efforts and how our budgets align to those. So some budget considerations and trending. These are some things that we were looking at over the last number of days, and really I think crystallized for us just some of the parameters that we continue to deal with and address like most municipalities. In the last 2 years, we have averaged a 2.2% increase in the number of households in our community per year. So that's an average per year, 2.2%. Our CPI here in Ontario has had a 2-year average, again, of 2.1% per year. I think we share those just to say that as we look at budgets, as we look at where we end up with this particular budget, those continue to be considerations in the delivery of service and the delivery of what you see in front of you and in the delivery of the programs that we administer. Infrastructure levy. Last year, as I highlighted, there was a 1% investment made. 2018, we have that proposed 1.5% that is captured in the scenario that you're going to see today. And of course, we need to remain sustainable despite reductions in senior level government funding. Over the last number of years, we have seen a decrease in that historical decrease in OMPF funding. So with that, we need to continue to remain sustainable. We need to continue to advocate. I know these are conversations that Councillor Foster and I have had around AMO and the advocacy happening at AMO and some of that information. But remaining sustainable despite those reductions will be important as we move forward. And again, other considerations that we need to address when we look at our budget, both short-term and long-term. So this was a slide that Angela put together. You know, we've titled it Closing the Gap. And I think, you know, a quick summary of what it really is intended to show. The top line is the tax levy. The bottom line is the total households. As you can see, back in 2009, the gap between those two was a lot larger than it is now. The only reason I highlight that is to show that I think council has continued to push and to look for efficiencies, and as that gap tightens, we are doing more with less, so to speak. We continue to look for efficiencies, and the tighter that chart gets. Now, albeit you're still seeing an increase in taxes, and that will never happen, but the number of households is increasing faster than the number of taxes. So if that gap was to stay the same throughout, you would see a much larger increase.
If I may, Mr. CEO, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to highlight again that graph that you showed there. Because it does, and I know maybe the other night some of us, and myself included, maybe came up a little strong about, you know, asking to find efficiencies in the way we do things. Well, this graph really shows that we do that, and it highlights this maintaining a cost-conscious approach in regard for the taxpayers. My graph actually has numbers on it. So, I mean, back in 2009, the gap between the tax levy and the total households was approximately almost $4 million. And we've whittled that down to, you know, maybe $100,000. So if we were just spending at the rate of growth, that gap would be there and continue on. So, I mean, over the last 9 years, staff has done an excellent job of finding efficiencies and doing more with less.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just moving on to November 15th and the follow-up. This was the slide that I showed at that particular meeting, and it looked at, and I think highlighted, what were the uncontrollable and within control budget factors. Just again, to repeat those uncontrollable pieces, a negotiated collective agreement, salary adjustment, wage progression through the grid. Of course, just the general inflationary increases that I shared with you in the previous slide, and the cost of construction, tenders, bids, and what we're seeing, and of course, utilities. Within control, there's always those things around service and the delivery of service, whether they be materials in our parks, cemeteries, beautification, of course, service levels, something that council sets, and the professional services. So whether that be things like contractual services for transit, consulting services that we do for a lot of our plans and master planning work. So what council said to us, I think very loud and clear on November 15th, regard for taxpayer affordability. Are we addressing efficiencies, I think as you highlighted, Mr. Chair? Are we looking at revenues? Have revenues gone up, and are revenues offsetting where we see increases? And again, some high-level details regarding expenditures, commitments, kind of a chart to show where monies are apportioned in terms of the tax levy. This is a slide I showed last time as well, and I included again just to share with council what are some of the things that you're seeing that are new or continued in terms of budget expenditures within this particular budget. As we shared last time, we've made some small increases around learning and development to the tune of $20,000 for staff and council. We've added that delegation mission piece to $20,000 for staff and council. TVTA funding is currently at $30,000. And they are requesting an additional 10, which is not included in our projections. The Beamsville BIA when they were here last year, talked about a multi-year commitment of $35,000. I highlight a point there that staff will, and I'll focus on this a little bit later, staff continue to want to work with the BIA and I'd say the TVTA as well in terms of long-term sustainability and changing the model, at least the service delivery model. What that looks like, we're not sure yet. But collaboration on the executive director work plan, collaboration on how tourism fits into our economic development strategy and so forth. And of course, the procurement FTE, it is in the budget, it is a new function, but we'll highlight some of the changes we've made since the last time we were in front of you on that item as well. So since November 15th when we were in front of you, what have we been doing? The missions delegations budget was set at $30,000. We've lowered that to $20,000 as I highlighted on the previous slide. We've looked at procurement and the procurement requirement within the organization, and we've decided to phase that now down to a quarter of a year. We want to do a policy review first. We want to look at what are our policies, where are our policies, and what needs to happen with our policies first, and then move forward with that. We've finalized our growth projections, and Councillor McMillan had asked about growth, and was this inclusive of growth? Growth is at 1.23%. We reviewed our reserves. I think we had heard and we've read in the media some organizations are putting less into reserves. Some are looking at using reserves in different ways. We reviewed, do we need to invest in our reserves at the level we are investing, and we do need to continue that. We need to make sure, again, from a long-term sustainability perspective, that reserves are healthy and we continue to invest in those reserves. We looked at staffing, service delivery needs, and again, I've highlighted here that board governance piece. We looked at both the TVTA, we looked at the BIA, and I say the Beamsville BIA, but we've got a Merchants Association in Jordan as well. We looked at just what is the transition plan for those organizations that rely on the town in some fashion, and how does that process work moving forward. So here's the slide that I think we included last year in the budget, and really spoke to, I think, what Councillor McPherson started and a number of other councillors had requested back. We've divided our expenditures and funding sources into 4 categories, and I'm not sure if you can see them all here. You may be able to see them in your package. We actually can't see them all completely here, so I'm going to go through a hard copy and take you through them. The first categories is supplies and services. Is supplies and services, and that's broken down into supplies and materials, as you see there. The legal, consulting, and contractual services, utilities, and professional development and missions, each comprising $20,000. The next section is the major section, and that's what we've titled our human resource, human capital piece, and those new and enhanced initiatives. So the majority of that comes, as we spoke at fair length last time, from our salary and grid progressions, our ESA obligations, how we're looking at service and service delivery, and so forth, where we're at from an equal pay perspective, et cetera. We've got operational increases, which are just generally the need to deliver various services, and those increases. The procurement FTE that we've stretched out to a quarter of a year, that is now down to a little under 20,000. The transit pilot, so that is the 2018 portion of those dollars, and we've included the 1.5% infrastructure levy. The next category is the funding sources, and what we haven't done, and we heard last time, is if you've got these increases in your human capital as a result of minimum wage, as a result of equal pay and so forth, what are the revenues that you're going to be able to either increase in the provision of providing programming that is already at a good rate, but can we increase fees? Can we look at other ways to generate revenues? And so this is really the revenue category that offsets any of the increases. We've been successful and lucky, I think, due to due diligence in terms of repaying projects. So we're seeing a savings from long-term financing and our interest payments. We've got some capital project offsets, and that is really things that are being funded out of operating that really should be funded out of capital, and those offsets and the back and forth that happens. Net transfers, you see there of a little over $360,000. The revenue projections in terms of our facility rentals, fees, and so forth at $460,000, and as I highlighted earlier, assessment growth at 1.2%. The last category that you don't see on your screen probably, but should be in your hard copy, is what we call our ABCs, our agencies, boards, and commissions, which show those increases in terms of the Lincoln Public Library, the Twenty Valley Tourism Association, and the Beamsville Business Improvement Association. At the end of the day, once you do that in and out, we see a increase of $794,086 this year, or a 5.6% increase. So what does that all mean when you look at the town portion, the library portion, and so forth, and you put that together with what the region is looking to increase, where waste management is from a regional perspective, and education. You can see from a town perspective and town departments in that portion, we sit at 4.402%. There is a total portion from the town of Lincoln as a whole, including our ABCs, of 5.6%. And then when we look at the blended tax rate and the tax levy impact, that is 2.1%. So what's that mean? You'll recall last year we showed you this circular slide here. That means $131 per year increase, and that is based on a home assessed at $375,000. You'll recall last year that assessment price was $300 for a home in Lincoln. The average assessment was $331,000, and the impact was probably around the same, with an increase of over 45,000, or a little under 45,000. We are sitting at a $131 increase per year, which equates to $10.91 per month, $2.52 per week, or 36 cents a day. That is approximately one extra large coffee per week at Tim Hortons. And I think, it's always important to put these things in perspective, I think, and highlight all the services we do offer. This is a fraction of the services that you see on this. We offer over 150 different services as the municipality. But these are just some of the ones that I wanted to bring to council's attention in terms of, and I think to the community's attention when we look at what taxes go to offset and what taxes go to provide, whether that be clean water when we turn the taps on or flush our toilets, whether that be community safety around fire and rescue services, whether that be the recreational amenities and so forth. So other budget items for consideration. I highlight these here as things that we want to consider in 2019 and beyond. And I say that not because these aren't things we're not ready to do now. This is not because we didn't think of these things now. I can tell you these are all things that probably when we were looking at our budget, we would have loved to be able to do now. It does become about needs versus wants. It does become about what are the things we need to do from a basic service delivery perspective, and how do we phase some of these things in. So moving forward, we need to continue to look at efficiencies in service delivery. We need to continue to look at succession and plan for retirements. There's a need absolutely to look at our technology requirements and implementation of existing systems. We heard that loud and clear, I think, at the last meeting in terms of we've invested in technology, council's made those investments, we need to finish and implement those systems. Customer service and a customer service specific strategy and associated training. Of course, looking at just our those strategic support services and strategic services in the organization, and again, the competitiveness in terms of where salaries and benefits are and compensation across the organization. We continue to, I think, remain competitive, but we need to continue to look at those things into next term of council. And I've highlighted one here that I think we talked about tangentially probably, but never to any detail. I think moving forward for the next term of council, I think it's important to start looking at budget guidance and that budget guidance framework in terms of where you see increases happening and what is an appropriate level of increase so that we can, I think, smooth out. When I look at some charts over the last number of years, there's a lot of up and downs, and I think those are important, and there's absolutely rationale for those, but I think budget guidance will be important as we move forward. So we can stop there, take some questions before we move into water and wastewater, or we can pause, let the library do their presentation, but definitely take some questions now before we move into the next phase.
And you know what, before we go to the questions too, and I've just got a few words I want to share and maybe frame the tonight's evening. As the budget chair, I've met with staff, and I do believe they had prepared a sound budget. As council, we can also tweak, lower, cut, but we must balance that with the services we want to deliver and what our community wants and needs are. Staff have heard council, I believe, and this budget continues to invest in council's priorities. We are providing new services like transit and enhancing significantly the services we already provide. I was invited over to my parents tonight and had supper, and my mom and dad both commented on the beautification downtown, the Christmas lights, the enhanced plantings and signage and the bus service. And they said to me, everything comes at a cost. But, you know, as someone who's not sitting around the horseshoe like we are, they appreciate what we're doing on the budget that we have. So that actually made me feel good, and I wanted to share that with you tonight. Affordability has been something we've heard by some, while also the desire to get work done and ensure value for money. I spent a long time last meeting talking about efficiencies. The CIO highlighted that compared to other small and large municipalities, less than half of our budget accounts for salaries and wages, versus 2/3 to 3/4 in a lot of other places. Also, staff will and continue to seek out different ways to complete their jobs and find savings in the delivery of contracted services. I know in talking to various members of SMT, this is a 2018 focus. Also, staff have said we need to set aggressive but realistic targets for revenue, which I believe they had. You don't want to shoot over the bar. And, you know, having been involved in doing budgets and things like that, you want to set realistic targets for revenue. And then when you exceed them, then you've got something extra to play with. And I think, you know, just a quick look at the arena advertising and the ice advertising and the various sponsorships that we've had coming to, you know, help augment the Christmas lights, we're headed in the right direction. And, you know, with that, I guess that, you know, that old adage, slow and steady wins the race. And if we go back to that chart, I think we're on the right path. So I'll open up questions to councillors. So Councillor McMillan, I saw your hand first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions, Mike. Slide 7, or when you talk about the budget expenditures, particularly the TVTA and the Beansville BIA, the 30,000 and 35,000, are those two figures confirmed now for 2018, or did I hear you say something about some negotiations going on that may go higher or even lower?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, what we've incorporated into the current scenario is only the 30,000 for the TVTA. They had requested when they came here an additional 10,000. We have not included that in the current scenario that you have before you. And as it relates to the BIA, we only included, as we did last year, the 35,000. So again, I mean, should council want to look at tweaks or amendments to those, you can, but what's included in this budget as it stands right now is those two to the tune of 30 and 35 respectively.
Okay, thank you. If I may, and then going on to page 9, the tax levy scenarios, and the bottom line here being 2.112%. I don't have any problem with that percentage. I think that's acceptable. That's in the range of affordability, I suppose. However, that's the blended rate. And I have difficulty with a blended rate. I think that can be deceiving. It's not, if we look at Lincoln's budget and ignore the other budgets that are put into the tax bill, and that's one of the problems because we're the tax collector for everybody. If we look just at the Lincoln portion, that portion will increase by 5.6%. That has to be made clear to the residents as well. They have to know that that's what's going to happen to their Lincoln tax bill. The savings will come from the other parts of the bill to take it down. And that's why I think that it is deceiving when we say 2.11. That's the overall blended rate. The Lincoln portion on there, that'd be 35% of the tax bill, will increase by over 5%.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I could just speak to Councillor McMillan's comments. I think you're absolutely right, Councillor. I mean, I heard coming into this into this position, into this role, that there's and I think different municipalities do it differently. We're trying to be as transparent as possible. I don't think it makes sense to show just one without the other, nor do I think it makes sense just to highlight what is the overall increase you're going to see at the bottom of your tax bill. While people look at their tax bills in their totality, people want to know what portion the town has increased versus the region and so forth. So I think last year we were very deliberate in ensuring that we shared both numbers, that we were as transparent as possible with both numbers, not just benefiting from the region being at 2%. But you're right, our portion as the municipality, we're responsible for a little over a third of the pie. That third of the pie is increasing by a total of 5.6%, as you can see highlighted there. Town departments at 4.4, and then the library, TVTA, and BIA getting us to 5.6. And then when you look at that blended rate, 2.1. But any communication we've done both to date and moving forward and last year has definitely been very clear about the piece that council and we as staff are responsible for.
And that is exactly my point, that we have to be 100% transparent with this whole thing, that there is that other figure there, and our customers need to know what that means and what the blended rate means. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll recall, just quickly to Councillor McMillan's point, last year we did that pictorial that showed a house, and we split the house into the three pieces, and we showed how much the town's piece had gone up, what education and waste had stayed the same as, and what the region had gone up by and what that meant. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, any way we can graphically, we will make sure we're clear with that message.
Thank you.
Councilor Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So through you, by the way, I was really glad to hear 3 times need versus want. So that's. I'm really also pleased, though, that staff are taking a look at the budget from that point of view, and I've been impressed actually with the initial budget that we had come back, and I'm also pleased to see that you've done work to do a little bit of trimming as it seems appropriate. So just a couple of questions. First of all, regarding the infrastructure levy, so is what we're looking at right now including the 1.5?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yes, it is, Councillor.
Okay, very good. Secondly, there's a variety of things that you brought up, including, and Councillor McMillan is going down the road with this too, with the region, but and you may or may not know this, but of course we have been dealing with a provincial government that hasn't got any credit for it, particularly in our area, but the reality is that the uploading of certain costs from the region has been significant. I mean, very significant. And so, but we have not seen that benefit at the municipal level. And so part of the adjustment that's going on is to try and make sure that we're covering what we have to do with the province moving away from some of the funding with us as well. So I'm not that worried about numbers. In fact, over the last couple of years we've talked about blended rates, and so from my point of view on the thing too, I think it makes an awful lot of sense. Now, but I guess the question is I believe the uploading is finished as of this year, or coming into the 2018, or was it finished with the last budget?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I believe it finishes in 18.
Okay. So this is the last piece of the puzzle. So as Councillor McMillan is saying, I think going into the next budget year as it's going on, that's when then people are going to have to stand on their own 2 feet, because the reality is that a lot of this adjusting should have come to an end. One of the difficulties with our municipality is that, and I've said this a few times, we're a have municipality. In other words, in Niagara region, the value of our homes, in Grimsby, the value of their homes, in Pelham and Niagara-on-the-Lake, we're the 4 have municipalities within this region. And so even when they're talking about a 2% increase at the region, it sometimes hurts us as we're going on, because the value of our homes are going up still dramatically. And of course, MPAC is also going through its assessments. I don't know if there's another one coming in this upcoming year, but let's just make sure that we're aware of that, so that, you know, we're able to defend ourselves as we're looking at these things. I just want to make mention to what the CAO talked about, and that is implementing some of the software solutions that make sense within the municipality. You guys, as our senior managers, have a very difficult job coming up over the next number of years, and that is how to reinvent what municipalities truly are. Digital government is a reality. It's coming at us like a train barreling down the tracks. And we have to make sure that we are as efficient as we possibly can. We need to be looking at software solutions that we possibly can, and making sure that you're putting the infrastructure in place to go and do what we have to do. I think both with capital and with our operations this year, you've taken a stab at it again, but we're not there yet. I really think, as I say, at the senior management level, you guys are going to have to come up with a thorough game plan for this. And we're going to have to do that as a municipality. If I've learned anything at all with the stuff that I've been doing at the AMO with this stuff, or within this particular area, municipalities, the progressive ones, are way out ahead of us. So, and we need to learn from that, and we need to actually start making the investments that we really have to. I don't particularly see it in this budget, but I think really what we need to do is have a digital game plan that's going into place. And so I challenge senior staff and council to think that one through for this upcoming year. And with that, I think I've probably said enough for now. We'll hear what everybody else has to say. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I could just highlight, or I think, you know, speak to some of the comments that Councillor Foster made. Absolutely. I mean, I think the region's benefited from that uploading, and I had this conversation just yesterday with a former regional employee, just, you know, getting my own head around kind of that uploading and the benefit to the region, and what are some other, you know, potential options that the region could look at in terms of how it does apportion those monies to local area municipalities. We've been a little fortunate lately that we've been successful in receiving regional grants for some programs, but that often has come as a result of extra monies that the region has been able to achieve through that uploading. I mean, I think you talked about, Councillor, that balance with, we are an affluent community, and I know in talking to members of the community about that particular piece, we always want to make sure that we don't make it unaffordable for our residents, and so I think we do try to strike that balance. Implementing software solutions and your digital government piece, you know, I've been doing a lot of reading around smart cities initiatives and those sorts of things, and I think they look to what the digital needs are going to be in an organization moving forward. And I think we've talked about whether it be working with the region or others to look at some services or some dollars that are available to really do a review of our IT governance, our IT provision in the organization. Not in a way to be critical of our IT resources, but how do we get better? How do we remain competitive moving forward? So, you know, I appreciate those comments, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, through you to the presenters. Certainly, I want to sort of carry on with that conversation, and at our last budget meeting, I certainly spoke to a full IT services review and creating a strategic direction for IT. sort of dovetailing on what Councillor Foster was saying about digital government, how it's coming at us like a freight train. I want to talk about not just that piece about software, but I want to actually talk about training and development as well. I don't know what we spend on an annual basis per employee for training. I just know what the corporate averages are, and it's about $1,250 a year, which is up about 12% over the previous year. So I'd be curious to actually know that, because I noticed in the budget you were mentioning a training component, and I just want to make sure that we're allocating enough resources to that, because with the software solutions that are coming forward, if you don't put the training piece in place, you've spent the money inefficiently, essentially, because then the outcome that you're looking for doesn't occur. I was pleased in what I saw with regards to the fact that you did not overinflate your revenue projections. I think they're pretty conservative, which leaves us in a position of actually knowing, what's possible. It's always great to think you can do more, but I would rather have a more conservative approach to that, because it's not always money in your pocket. So overall, I'm pretty pleased with it. I mean, obviously, there's some serious factors that we have no control over that are increasing our budget costs. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back to the early part of the presentation through you to the CAO and look at value for money audits. It's not an area that we've really been able to make any significant headway with. I think qualitative evaluation, we've had a little more success with it, but if we're talking about consideration for a governance model, if we're talking about the digital elements that need to go into a progressive digital game plan, it really begins to speak to a change in the governance model. We talk about policy governance. I talk a lot about it. I think we're starting to understand what that means, but it does leave you, when you start doing the work that you're really responsible for, and I think AMO is doing a very good job of setting an example for us about the roads that we need to go down, that starts to change the complexion of committee structures and priority items and where you spend your time. So I think it will be a very exciting year to see some of that start to come to fruition. I really appreciate the conversation about that. On that graph on page 5, I still feel that there are efficiencies in the organization. They're not represented by a decrease in services. They're not represented by a decrease in staff, but in the interstitial fat that is in any organization, because when we're able to control that, it does provide flexibility. I really am a firm believer in that. That then speaks to leaving more for direct services to our clients. I think anybody can get the eraser out. There's absolutely nothing about that action that should really be assigned to anybody that you're spending time really being critical of the budget and where the money is being spent. The $10,000 from missions and the $10,000 from TVTA, I'm looking for TVTA to remain at the 30, for the BIA for us to complete our commitment to them, but I would like to see the 10 out of missions and that 10 that TVTA is asking, I would like to see that reinvested in economic development. We've had 1 year, we're just starting to see the bare, really a bare bones in terms of what we can possibly do there. we're going to be moving into doing the economic development assessment, and as a result of that, there may be opportunities for us to give that a boost. It's too bad that I don't know whether it's possible for us to define that better. We shouldn't be approving money without really knowing what it's going to go for. We're not going to put 10,000 in there and hope for the best. But I think that's an area that now that we have it going, we should consider how we're going to keep the momentum going. So others may have some ideas about that. I'm not too sure about the customer service piece on page 10. Under other budget items, I thought that customer service was integral to the strategic plan, our current strategic plan, and I think that over the last 3 years, and certainly as we go into the 4th year, we know that major strides have been made. So I'm wondering, Mr. CAO, through you, Mr. Chairman, what is it that you're thinking of here?
Through Mr. Chairman, so just 2 comments. One specifically as it relates to the economic development strategy. My comment to that would be, I think hearing the mayor's support for economic development, I think is something that we're happy with. We've got an economic development strategy coming back, and I think it probably makes sense to let that strategy dictate what sort of investment is required, because I think oftentimes with strategies and with plans, they will very clearly lay out the type of investment that's required. So I don't think that stops us from coming back to you mid-year at some point throughout the year and saying, here's what the economic development strategy is showing, here's where we need to make additional investments, and here's how we can fund those additional investments moving forward. That would be my recommendation on that. Specifically to customer service, I think when we look at all of these things and we look at what are our, what I'm going to call human resource or FTE needs, you can't just, put a service in place and develop a customer strategy or a customer service strategy and a framework without the associated, I think sometimes resource piece that goes with it. Right now we have some CSRs, our customer service representatives that are working within Director Brigantino's department at the Fleming Center, but we need to look at customer service across the organization. And again, I think it's something we want to focus on moving forward and come to you with a well-informed plan. Again, it was something that, like most of those things we had this year that we would have loved to focus on, but I think when we look at, again, needs, wants, where is this budget going, what are some of the other more pressing needs, collectively I think we thought it's something that we would defer into 2019, come back to you with a strategy, and then put whatever sort of human resource or human capital needs that go along with it. So definitely things that Mayor Easton we're focused on, definitely things that we want to see bring forward. Just because I've said they're 2019 considerations, they're probably 2019 budget considerations in terms of additions, but they are things that you're going to hear about in 2018, at least in the later part of the year as we move forward with some of this work.
Well then, Mr. Chairman, through you, I go back to Councillor Thompson's comment. If that is the explanation, then we do need to ensure that we're not losing any money out of the, you can call them missions, et cetera, but in fact, it's an easy thing in the 4th year of a term for councillors to decide that they're going to be very, very selective about going to conferences in that 4th year. Not much is going to change. But to make that, to then redirect that investment, whatever it might be, into that customer services piece, I think makes very good sense. This is really one of the most important strategic directions that we identified. Maybe not as big as roads, but it was pretty high up there, if I recall. And certainly, yes, I have to say I'm very, I think we need to be very cautious now that the uploading to the region is completed. We have had a small opportunity here for some flexibility in the last few years. We're not going to see that. And if anything, I see the region as having its own major internal reprioritizations, particularly around capital. So it means that we need to be very, very sharp about where we are on those lists and the justifications for them, like we never have been before. We're going to have to really be ahead of the game because I think the competition is going to be really fierce now. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councilor Bernay.
Thank you, Chair Patrieva. To the delegations, just a couple of questions. I'm probably going to bounce around quite a bit, but at some point, we have talked in the budget about the opportunity for disposal of town-owned property. And I know we've talked about that, but what impact in terms of assisting this budget, do you look at that as a potential to come from that, Mr. CEO?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, and we've, part of the work plan that definitely I've had a conversation with our Director of Community Services, but something that I've started to meet with particular consultants on is specifically around that, an updated inventory of what are our town-owned assets and what we can do with them. I think about our conversation yesterday in terms of assets that we own, that we either will be required to continue to own or that we can dispose of. And so I think we haven't made necessarily massive revenue projections for those sorts of items. I know it's a conversation that the Director of Planning and I have had when we think about others that have come to us, whether it be Habitat for Humanity and so forth, saying, do you have something that you can give us? I think we first need to look and update our inventory of both facilities and vacant properties and vacant assets that we own, and then come back to council with here's what we've got, here's what we recommend disposing of. So we haven't incorporated, I think, anything substantial from a revenue perspective in terms of our projections. I think if we are successful with bringing that forward and can dispose of a piece of property as quickly as possible, those are, I think, additional funds that we would put into a capital account, and I think come back to council with how you want to spend those particular dollars. No different than I think the conversation we had last year if we were to exceed any targets on road allowance sales. Again, put those in an account, come back to council and, strategically ask council how they want to spend those particular dollars.
Thank you. If I could continue. Also, we've talked, as we've come into budget and we've looked at, different things that this council has looked at entertaining, and obviously we've looked at the code of conduct and we've looked at this integrity commissioner. So what is that component adding to the budget? If you could refresh my memory on that.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, we have made those incremental increases in our corporate budget as it relates to having an integrity commissioner, what I'm going to call on retainer, so that council can ask particular legal questions to. That is something that, as per the Act, we're going to have to focus on moving forward, and it's going to become one of those mandated or legislated requirements. So those are some of the things that we've made accommodations for within our corporate budgets. So I don't have the exact sheet here, but
it's built into the corporate
it's built into the budget
section. Okay. Another question through you, Mr. Chair. When we look at other budget items for consideration as we move forward beyond 2018, one of the things that I wanted to highlight that many organizations give lip service to, but never seem to really get to, and that's succession planning and / training. And Councillor Foster and Councillor Thompson spoke about training, but when you look at page 23 of the trends and metrics in our organization, and you look at 25% of our employees are eligible to retire before 2020. I think that's an alarming number. And when we look at succession planning, and many organizations talk about it, but never invest in it. And I think when you look at that number, I think that's got to be something. When you look at that guidance framework from 2018 to 22, I'd hate to see that get buried too deep. Just a comment.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, absolutely. I mean, I take seriously the councillor's comment around paying it lip service. I think oftentimes it's one of those things everybody includes in their presentations, and I think if you don't deal with it appropriately, it does become a massive liability for an organization, especially an organization that is smaller, that is leaner, where you have people doing multiple works. I think about our water department. I think about community services. We've got an aging workforce. We are starting to have, I think, the types of conversations that we need to have with our employees, and better, I think, better determining when they're going to leave, when they're leaving the organization, when they're retiring. But we definitely need a strategy. I mean, from a human resources perspective, we definitely need to start having those strategic conversations and to ensure we're in front of council with what that looks like, what the potential liability of that looks like, because there's costs. People leaving an organization, people coming in. Yes, there's some gapping dollars we benefit from not having someone in the role. But think about 6 months to bring someone up to speed, 6 months of training someone, all those other things. So those are things that we need to absolutely plan for. Do I wish we were much further along than we are? Absolutely. But I agree with you. I think that next term of council, a lot of those internal pieces are going to be pieces that we're going to be grappling with, both as staff and I think as we bring information to you. So thank you.
Thank you. Just one last question, if I could. One of the first things I wrote down, Mr. CAO, when you first started your presentation was, as the mayor already commented on, value for money. I'm just wondering if you could, from your perspective as the CEO of this municipality, what is your definition of how you perceive value for money, or how you look at value for money when you put that in your presentation right at the forefront?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think when I look at when I look at value for money, a couple of things kind of come to mind. I think one is, are we delivering the right services at the right level, at the right cost? I think as well, how we deliver services. Are we delivering services through contractual obligations that we may have, or are we looking at them internally and internal service delivery? There's a number of things we do, and I know the directors can speak to these far better than I can within each of the departments, where we're looking at contracted services, for example, and we haven't received what I'm going to say is preferential pricing, or things that when you're spending a certain amount of money, there should be a much more better value that you receive for it. So I think that's one of them. There's absolutely things that are required to be contracted out. It would cost the municipality too much money to provide. But I think there's, whether it's custodial services, whether it's things like that, I think we need to look at each of the services we provide, electrical, HVAC, tree cutting, the list could continue in terms of what are the things we do, and make sure that we are getting value for money. Make sure that what we're spending is in line with what others are spending. I think sometimes people look at municipalities and it's easy to say this is the rate we're going to charge a municipality. We also have massive buying power, both alone and when we look at procurement and some of the things that's able to do, we can be far more competitive. So I think it's a combination of those things, but I think it starts with the services we're delivering, how we're delivering them, and who's delivering them for us.
So all that said, and I'm glad you elaborated so succinctly on that, because I've been a big proponent for quite a bit of time about procurement, and the fact that maybe we're not getting that value for money because we don't have a procurement person. And I'm glad to see that we're adding that in the budget, but we're adding it now as a quarter year. So I guess that policy review period that you're allowing yourself before we bring that person on board is going to be very, very beneficial to get to that, what you're referring to as value for money.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think the simple answer to that is yes, Councillor. I think Angela can speak to a little bit of the work already going on with one of our employees that is doing some of the procurement work in terms of one of the responsibilities she has on top of the other things that she's doing. But definitely the policy review piece will happen first, and then the phasing in of that particular resource later in the year.
Thank you very much.
Shariva, through you to the delegation. I think Councillor Brunet just asked one of my questions that I had. It was regarding the phased-in quarter of a year procurement. So you've just answered that. As for TVTA funding at $30,000, I'm good with that. I think the $10,000 is a bit, could be put somewhere else or just removed altogether. The Beamsville BIA, in here it says it's a multi-year, and I was under the understanding that it's a 2-year, so this would be the last year. you just-
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's how I understood it, and I think that's why, we need to have that what I'm going to call that governance conversation on how the resources that both these agencies have, how they work with the municipality, what are their outcomes and objectives, how does that, I think, align to what we're doing from the strategies that we're putting in place, whether it be community strategies, whether it be economic development strategies, and so that's how I understood it. When I say multi-year, it was a 2-year at that particular point in time.
Okay, very good. Also, you've already spoken to this about the integrity commissioner would be on a retainer, so as needed. That's how it would work, as needed, so it's not a permanent.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's how we would see it structured. I know Clerk Colossus and I have had some conversations around what that bylaw looks like. How do we come back to council with that and close that loop? Because I think it will be important that we get that in front of you early in the new year, considering the January 1st timeline.
Okay, thank you. I feel pretty happy with what's in front of us here tonight, and with full regard for the taxpayer affordability. And the only other question I have is regarding the infrastructure 1.5. I know that's included in this scenario. If we remove it to 1%, what kind of impact would that have on the levy?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, it would lower it to 5.1.
Okay, very good.
And then likely the blended rate a little under 2.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, I'd like to thank Angela and Mike for the expenditures and funding sources chart. It's exactly what I was asking for. And it really, did highlight for me, the impact of the human capital elements within the budget, the salary and grid progression, the ESA obligations, and the service delivery. I mean, that is a $850,000 hit, and nothing really comes close to that. The next one down would be the operations increases, which is $330,000 or 2.4%. So really, to me, this is in many ways a human capital budget. It is a budget that doesn't have any huge other costs in it. It really kind of comes at me as that's the significant impact, the change in salary, or the change in the contract for our employees, as well as the minimum wage impact. So that was interesting. I would just also comment that I kind of see this as a stay the course budget, if I could put a term to it. When we got together back in 2014 and we put our future focus together, we put together these pillars of communication, economic development, customer service, and roads, transportation, and traffic. And we've made, I think, significant investments in all of those 4 categories over the 3 years that we've been here. And in many ways, those are now starting to pay dividends. We're starting to see the impact of the investment that we made in those important goals that we had for this term of office. So, I think that when I listened to Mike's presentation, that the one thing that came out to me or jumped out at me was this change comes at a cost, and we, I think, are trying to drive change within our community, and I think we're starting to see it. I think that our residents are starting to see it, and I think that this budget is conservative in certainly in many ways. When we talk about the capital side of it, I think we are looking at this as somewhat of a conservative budget, and I just think of that. We can't back off of what we committed to, and I think stay the course is important for us, without frivolous spending, if you will. I think we are very We are very particular on what we do invest in. You know, I no surprise to anybody around this table, I am absolutely supportive of our continued investment in the downtown cores, and that, you know, I think that creates complete communities, and I think that it's the right thing to do. Yes, there's an onus on the organizations to I'm not so sure self-sufficient is possible. I think there's probably going to be a support that we need to provide to them ongoing, but I think we're starting to see the results of that investment. You know, when I go back to the future focus, you know, we talk about gateways and we talk about beautification, we talk about, you know, those types of things in the downtown core, and those are starting to happen. So, you know, I'm all in for this next year to commit to the BIA, and Mike and I and Paul, Danny are working on a strategy to absolutely have accountability, and you know, the BIA's got its strategy that it presented to this council back in the fall of 2016, and we are planning to come back to council in probably February to present an update of where we're at. So that's the way I see this. You know, I am supportive of where we're at. You know, I say it's a stay the course budget, and I'm in. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, because I will wrap. So I'm making notes here. Good points. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Councillor Patriva. Mr. Chair, I appreciate, actually, it's perfect timing, because I was actually going to go down the road with TVTA and BIA with regards to just the value of the investment, value for the investment, rather. And I'm hoping that through the next year, we're going to see in and around that governance piece, more of a return on investment scenario from them. I'm all about the economic development component of it. Just show me it's working and show me the actual spin-off and what the impact on the municipality is. And then I'm okay with it. I just want to make sure that is very forefront. To hold them accountable, as Councillor McPherson was saying, holding everybody accountable for what we invest in them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Foster.
Just a couple of quick things, and actually I appreciate Councillor McPherson's comments, because I hadn't really thought of the investments that we've been doing in roads and stuff like that as in the wants versus needs that I'm always liking to quote, but definitely it's a need, and you're quite right. I think what has been spent, I think, is showing within the community. I mean, the complaints that we're getting, I mean, you know, we'll always get complaints on roads. That seems to never be a never-ending story, but they've dropped dramatically. And I mean, and we seem to be getting, you know, some traction in various quarters within the municipality with some of this stuff. There was a discussion earlier about some of the monies that we're not going to spend. In other words, like the 30,000 with TVTA is what we're going to do. I disagree with us taking and moving that to any other area. I think it should just go away. And the simple reason is that, you know, one of the things that I believe through you to CAO, you guys have been really good at coming to us saying we need to spend money in this particular area. You haven't asked for it anymore within these other areas, so I really don't see a need to be going and adding additional funds when it hasn't been requested. So, so I'm pretty happy with that. You know, so I had something else, but I'll figure it out later. Thanks.
Councillor Ochima.
Thank you, Chair Patriva. I'm looking back to last year, and we started at almost 9% and then worked it down, and I forget what our final numbers were, but I mean, I know that as years go by, we're taking budget process even, we're getting even more serious about it. We're also investing more in the community, and I think we're seeing the results. And to start this year at whatever it was, 6 something was a really good start to begin with, and to be able to whittle it down even more, we appreciate that. And on top of that, we have a intermunicipal transit system launched just last week. I'm pretty excited about that. It's just a small detail of all the things that we're seeing happen in the community. So I'm happy with the budget. So a positive response from me to you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I mean, I think that's probably a good opportunity for me to highlight just, you know, we have taken a different approach this year. I mean, your senior management team sitting at the side here has taken a collaborative approach. It is a little bit different from last year, and I think we continue to evolve our budget process, and I would tell you it'll get better, I think, as the years go by. You know, the group that's doing all the heavy lifting over there are the ones that need to be commended for this budget, not your CAO. You know, I probably, you know, I'm at the front here speaking to it, but they're the ones that show the passion for the community impact that their work does. And every new thing that is added, either through council or by their CAO, takes them away from something else, whether that be tree lighting, whether that be intermunicipal transit, whether that be, you know, the extensive work with Prudhome's, whether that be any of the other programming that we're doing. So I did want to recognize that. And put at the forefront, we continue to look to do business differently. So my acknowledgement, knowing we haven't fully wrapped up, but I did want to take this opportunity to thank SMT.
Yeah, through Mr. Chairman, what we have now before us is not a complete budget, in that we still have to consider portions of the capital budget that we requested more information on, and possible changes there. So that will have an impact on the bottom line if in fact we do go ahead and make any changes in the capital budget as well.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that is correct. I think specifically around the Vineland Fire Station and the desire to come back, you know, with some more information. I think in December, as it relates to the design piece on that. I know we heard some information from Mr. Arians and FBH when they were here, and Director Dale provided you an email summary in terms of what they said relative to that. But definitely when we come back in December, we can come back with a scenario that shows that both in and out. And then I think, you know, put a final wrap on the budget as it relates to that piece.
Because if I remember correctly, there was $200,000, $100,000 on the tax levy, just for that one item.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Angela can speak directly to that particular piece. It was 100,000 levy, 100 through long-term borrowing through debenture. But Angela can speak to the technical piece on how it probably won't make an impact as it relates to lowering the levy, because we would put that money back into our long-term borrowing. But Angela can explain that.
CPI?
Through you to Councillor McMillan. My recommendation is, if you look back, last year our capital levy increased $20,000. This year it increased just over $30,000. So keeping that trajectory, it would take us 4 years to recoup that $100,000 in our capital levy if we cut that capital levy. So my recommendation is, let's keep the $100,000 in the capital levy and then look to reduce the debt component of the budget.
Okay. That's good. That's good, yeah.
With the water wastewater, or do you guys want to take a break from talking and we'll call the library up? What say you? You're in the chair.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think we can get through it fairly quickly. There's a bit of continuity here while we're sitting up here. I look at Councillor Foster cringing a bit over there, so we'll try to go as quickly as possible. And I will turn it over to Ms. Safani.
Thank you. So just a reminder to council, I think back in 2000, if you remember back to 2016, CN Watson was here who established the next 5-year rate study, which council adopted for the 2017 and on budgets. So going through, we're going to look at the water wastewater budget and just highlighting some of the variance here. So for salaries and wages, that number there, the 181, includes some legislative changes, but on top of that, it also has some accommodation for succession planning in the water department, because right now we're looking at a large number of those employees within that department are coming up to retirement within the next 3 to 5 years. So the other variance we have there is the operational, and that really is just variable. That includes the regional rate increase and some slight increases in materials and supplies. The region increased their variable rate by 2%, so you're seeing that impact in that line there. Overall, though, we're looking at a transfer to reserves for just over $1 million for the Water Reserve Fund. The wastewater budget, again, slight change in the salaries. We used to do an allocation interdepartmental. We're not doing that anymore. I think we've mentioned that before. Under the operational services and supplies, we have a couple of changes there. The major component of that is the regional charges is up approximately $500,000, and that's for 2 reasons. The first reason is their projected cost for 2018 has gone up, and in addition is their wastewater budget is 100% fixed. So what they do is they do a reconciliation, which then impacts our budget. So this impact is actually from the 2016 year-end reconciliation that is impacting our budget this year, which is approximately $350,000. And then finally included in that number of approximately $200,000 is Public Works has included a budget for CCTV of the wastewater system. So that's also included in there. So the overall reserve transfer is $487,000, and that's down from what we typically transfer to the reserve. But staff did a look at the 10-year plan versus what we are projecting to have in that reserve, and we are more than comfortable with the level of reserves in there right now. So again, going back to the CN Watson study, the study was that we would hold our variable rate steady and then just increase the base rate. So this is what you're seeing. The variable rates from 2017 to 18 have not changed, but the only impact is in the base rate. So for a yearly impact, if your water and wastewater usage were going to stay exactly the same, the resident would see a $14 and $64 increase for the year, which is about 4-cent increase per day for water and wastewater services.
All I can say is, wow. I mean, we finally made it with this. Like, it's the beating that we've taken within the community for water and wastewater rates, and I can speak from my own home, the beating I've taken from my wife over paying the water bill. This is a huge good news story that you're bringing in front of us tonight. And the community, I think, should be really proud, and the work that we've done, I think, is showing very clearly. The path has been taken properly, and while we're watching others around us, let's not mention Grimsby, who are suffering from having to figure this all out and get themselves into the 21st century. This is just a huge good news story. I can't believe how good it is.
Yeah.
So,
going through this presentation, Councillor, I thought of you right off the bat.
I hope there's tweeting going on by certain people who are communications people.
Yes,
all over the community.
I do too, because you know what, this is a fantastic, I'm going to say fantastic news story. We're at a point where our water and wastewater system are sustainable. And Councillor, you last year you hearkened and voice of reason and about what we commit to reserves. We actually decreased our wastewater reserves almost $1 million. And while others, like you say, fumble and bumble with this, others still have this as part of their levy and artificially deflate it. We have been open and transparent about this from the get-go. So what you use is what you pay for. And I mean, it's just, we had the system last year where it actually called for a decrease, but with some sage counsel by Councillor McMillan about, well, what just in case if that model isn't right, you know, it was wise. And I think we're there. And that base, you know, the variable is stayed the same, and just the base has fluctuated, and that base fluctuation adds to, or allows us to maintain the capital. So, tremendous. I see Councillor Rajima taking a picture. Tweet that out, please, Councillor. You are, you. Okay. And hopefully you other councillors will retweet that and that, because I'm too busy managing 2 phones and a presentation, so. Thank you very much. Maybe turn my mic on, to provide an overview of the library budget to us, to assist us in guiding our 2018 operating budget deliberations this evening. Vice Chair of the Library Board, Donna Burton, is also here as well. Please come forward and proceed when you gals are ready.
There we go. I know I have a soft voice. Thank you for giving us the opportunity tonight to present to you our 2018 budget. On your screen right now, you see what you have seen previously in the presentations. And the total amount that we're looking at as an increase is $85,552. And I'll just sort of highlight where that is coming from. But I first thought I would like to highlight some of the revenue we get. The town of Lincoln provides the majority of our funding, but we just also have a few other areas that we do get some funding. We do get a number of provincial grants. At both locations, we provide online Service Ontario services. So, for example, if someone wants to renew their driver's license online, order a birth certificate, we can assist them with that online service. The province has also provided us with a brand new digital services grant, which is about $4,000. And so we are going to be using that to enhance our technology, probably with our online products. And we also get an unrestricted provincial grant, which the province has not changed for us and on all libraries in Ontario since 1997. Hopefully we will be seeing an increase in that. On Thursday, the Ontario Library Association and the Federation of Ontario Public Libraries will be going to Queen's Park to advocate on our behalf for an increase in that grant. So I'm hoping that that will be successful and we'll get some more funding from the province. Our other revenues, we get our fees and fines, our general sales for programs, for photocopies, et cetera. We do have a small amount for non-resident fees. We're using some development charges for collection building, and then if we're fortunate enough to get donations, we can also put that into our pot. Our expenses and some of the drivers that we have, this has been talked about before, about Bill 148, and it's hitting us quite hard. Our student pages get minimum wage, so all of them will have to be moving up to the new amount, so that's going to be a bit of a hit on our budget. There's going to be some adjustments to our seasonal employee rates again to increase the the gap between the minimum wage and our casual library assistants, and also the regular cost of living and grid increases. With regards to the operational services and supplies component, one thing we are looking at is putting $10,000 into our budget to have a library operations review. We'd like to review our staffing complement, our space requirements, and how we utilize the space in both locations, and some future service requirements. As we've been talking about before, we're talking about Prudhome's, the growth that we're continuing to have in Beamsville area. So we're looking at what ways we can provide better library service. We have some different demographics coming into the community, so we really need to provide service to all those different groups. So we're hoping that we'll be able to have a professional come in and give us some advice. We really haven't done a lot of looking that way for quite a while, so I think it's overdue that we do this particular project. For the administrative components, we're looking at small equipment purchases. We have had great success in our STEM programming. We do a lot of things with basic robotics, basic coding, and those kinds of things, so we want to add to that. We're looking at perhaps getting a green screen so people then can do some, photography or some video projects, and so we're looking at different things like that. We're also looking at doing perhaps some low-tech makerspace things like getting a sewing machine, because a lot of people now don't know how to do basic repairs, so that might be something that we want to look at as well. And also our circulation desk equipment like scanners and receipt printers. For the last component, the equipment, vehicles, and technology, the two key increases there are the increased internet connectivity. It's over $12,000 for 2018, and that is due to the service levels required for the library to move to the town server. Then we also have a $5,000 software increase for the Microsoft 365. In the past, the library just purchased the Microsoft Office package, and then we were able to use that for the life of the computers. So now we're going to be moving with the other town staff to the cloud Microsoft 365 product. And that's about a $5,000 increase to the budget. And that's all that we have. So.
Any questions? Councilor Terrace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the delegation. Thank you very much, Jill and Donna, for coming out tonight. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to make a comment. Just some of the services that you're offering there, the Service Ontario, and the new robotics, coding, and green screen. Fabulous idea. I'm really happy to hear that. And your low-tech makerspace. You guys are, you're always coming up with new and inventive things, and I think it's really great. That sounds really exciting, all of those. Everything's pretty clear on your budget. I don't really have any questions. Some of it's driven by the increase in the minimum wage, so that explains the increase there, and you can't really do much about that. It's kind of put on you. Other than that, I don't really have a question regarding the budget. I just wanted to make a statement, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor McMillan.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Jill, Donna. Just on your last slide, the expenses, the budget drivers. What is the expense for vehicles?
We don't, that's just the name of the, yeah, we have no vehicles, no.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I was wondering why that was there. The next line, though, the connectivity, you said $18,000?
It's going to be about 14,000, almost $15,000 will be connectivity for next year.
But this is a one-time expense, right?
No, it will be continually, this will be our connectivity moving forward.
So it's not to pay for the transition, it's a yearly expense.
It will be a yearly expense.
It will be a new budget line for it.
Yes, some of that is not new money to the town. The library is going to be taking over the Bell line at the Fleming Center. So that cost is just been transferred to us, but there is another $5,000 or so for the Moses Rittenhouse branch for the fiber line for the connection to the server. So that is a new cost.
And so it'll be a new yearly cost.
It will be yearly now. That will be the cost, and increases based on the providers' increases.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate you presenting this. Pleased to hear that you're going to the province and asking for an increase with regards to the unrestricted provincial grant. Correct me if I'm incorrect, but it's about $5,000, isn't it?
It's almost $41,000.
Oh, okay, sorry. All right, so that has not increased since 1997?
Since Mr. Harris's time, yes.
Okay, very good. I really do appreciate you guys taking the initiative to go after that. I'm also really pleased to see the library operations consultant project. I think that's very important moving forward and bringing us into a space that we're in 2017. And certainly technology-wise and making sure that we're running as efficiently and providing the digital services that are required for this particular time. Question in around the fiber connection. Is that just for connectivity to the server, or are we talking also connectivity to the internet itself?
No, there's going to be, both locations will have 2 internet connections. One will be for the public, for our public computers and for Wi-Fi, and the other one will be for the staff functions. So there'll be 2 internet connections at each location.
Okay. And that's good. Thank you very much.
Councillor Foster?
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the presentation, and I really don't have any issues with the library budget this year. I think we've sort of balanced a number of things, and I think everything this year has been nicely justified as well as we're going through this. Just a couple of comments. It's all nice to talk about revenue, but the big problem remains is that the overwhelming amount of money that goes into the library comes from the municipality. So that's always both a danger to libraries, but also a reality to libraries as well. And so that sometimes leads to some issues between the municipality and libraries, and then other times it brings them closer together. It's just the nature of the thing. I wanted to point out that it's nice that you put development charges down on this, but the reality is it's the municipality that controls development charges, so there can be requests to make use of things towards it, but it's the municipality that controls that. Good luck with this going to the province, and the reason I say that, being on the AMO board, the much ill-fated 1% HST thing that was brought forward was machine gunned quite substantially by not only all of the leaders of the provincial parties, but also many of the people that were at the AMO conference last year. And going into an election year, it's highly unlikely we're going to see anything else coming. But it's always a good thing to keep that doorway open. I've been a strong believer in making sure that the voices are heard within the community. So anyway, good job. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for coming in and presenting the budget. This is the cleanest library budget I think I've ever seen in my life, and I think it's really, you should be commended in presenting it in this way, because it makes it much easier to understand what level of service it is that you're attempting to provide. I'm trying to remember, Mr. Chairman, along with the operations review, the other review that, and I realize it's a singular consultant that's coming, and if I could just ask through you to the director, what is that other review? Is it actually being done by the library? Is that the one that is being done by the town? Is it Mr. CAO? Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, there is what I'm going to call two reviews going on. One, I think, as it relates very specifically to the library and the functioning internal to the library, and then there is a review that I was directed to look at through council that we're in the process of finalizing and issuing an update to council as it relates to the consultant that's been retained, and just sharing some more information with council in terms of that project and what that project looks forward. Part of that conversation, I think, is at a broad base, public library governance in the province of Ontario, and I think sharing with council where that looks like, as well as just that ability to create, I think, a stronger operational relationship as we're starting to do with the library moving forward. So two separate reviews.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think this is an excellent time for this to be occurring, because I can see from what Councillor Foster is saying and others that if we want library service to survive and be a healthy part of our community, it does mean that we have to start looking at how we're going to invest in it, which means that we have to clean up our house always. It's always a little painful. We always feel that. But it's the only way that we can come to terms with the fact that without our support and understanding, we can't expand the library. We can't address it in terms of the technology and the services that are so in demand in the community. And so I really, I'm hoping that these two reports will come together and really be complementary to each other, because as you begin to plan for new services, rationalization of services in one area, maybe growing in another area, we will need to have this, and it really does, it has to be very, very succinct. So I think you've done a very good job over the last 3 years of turning around a lot of speculation on our part, and I think you've weathered that, and you should be complimented on that. Thank you very much.
Councillor Foster.
Sorry, and the mayor just reminded me of one thing. And we talked about this at the library board as well. The 10,000 that's being recommended for the study, my opinion is that's light. And so one of the things that I'm hoping is that as the library board really truly gets this figured out and figures out what value should really be coming in, I think that would be discussion between the CEO and the CAO in case, and making sure that we have that right figure established for that. And it's in the interest of the municipality to make sure that this is done properly as well. So there are potential funding sources that can be looked at, but let's not go at it light. Let's make sure that we're spending the right amount to go and get the correct answers within the municipality with this. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, ladies. Excellent presentation. Members, this back on. Is there anything else further to discuss this evening? Does anyone have any other questions, or is there any direction to provide to the staff? Mr. CAO.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I've just so two quick comments that I wanted to make. No. Okay. Through you, Mr. Chairman, just two quick comments I wanted to make. One, we will be sending out some communication materials following this evening's meeting, I think highlighting just at a high level what we discussed tonight and so forth. And I've just been alerted through Director Safani and Terry. They're working on finalizing what the blended rate is, and I know we didn't want to get into the blended rate. I think it actually isn't 2.1, it's closer to 2.6 or 2.7, but we'll get that exact amount and make sure that when we put those numbers together, they're the right numbers. So I wanted to be completely clear with that. I just got that email now, so I think it was just a human error in that number.
So we've talked about a lot of differing things this evening, and one of the things that I've heard from a few other councillors is this procurement piece that's going in place. And I see what you've done with from a budgeting point of view of looking at a quarter. Is there, through you to the CAO, is there any opportunities at all to be, doing your examination of staff and figuring out whether or not there's opportunities to fill without adding a new staff member when it's all said and done? I know it's sometimes a stretch, but because the reality is if there's opportunities to go down the road with that, then actually your procurement person might possibly come into place earlier. And it might meet some of the needs that I'm hearing from other members of council. So through the CAO, just what the thinking process is.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think a good, both a good point to make and a good question, Councillor. I think that's always what we first try to do. We try to look at internally, is there capacity to do it? I can tell you, I think similar to a number of other roles, we have an individual that's currently doing it, and I don't like to use the description, but sometimes we're doing things off the corner of our desk, and so while this is a priority, if there is an ability to do it, internal, that's something that we would definitely look to do in terms of just looking at the structure within our finance and administration department. I still believe it's probably required, and that can't happen. But if there is a way to do that, then we'll definitely look at that. I don't believe so, to be completely honest at this point in time, but I say that knowing we need to review the policy, we need to look at what we're currently doing, and what can potentially happen. So if there's an ability to do that and bring it in sooner, then absolutely.
Chairman, having been through a number of value for money audits now, once you start to go down this road, you really have to be prepared to be ready for what you find. And you can have some very good practices in place, and with the right eyes and the right skill, you will be sometimes quite amazed at where the opportunities are. I think it's a robust kind of exercise that if you really put your shoulder into it, you feel much more comfortable coming out of the end of it because you've been through every possibility that you can. So I feel this is a real weakness in the organization. If it could be said that there is a significant weakness, I think an external person would say this is an area where you could take a good scrubbing, and why not? We're in very good shape in so many other areas. I think we can withstand this without any difficulty.
And what I think tonight was another excellent session, and I just, and I hearken back to Councillor McPherson's words. We brought in a lot of things when we started this term, and we had those 4 pillars, and you know what, we've really become focused on those, and we've kind of said what we were going to do. We've got our roads rehabilitation level at $1.8 million. We've got a sustainability plan set behind that. We're also looking at our urban roads. We used to wait before and do the underground services before we would do the top services, and some of those lagged behind in the residential neighborhoods, and we've addressed that. Councillor Foster, I remember a couple of years ago when we talked infrastructure levy, and I wanted to strangle you, but now here you are leading the pack, saying 1.5%. I'm proud of you. And that's, you know what, we've all grown together as a council, and we've come together to have, value for money, and make sure that we make the taxpayer make sure that the budget is affordable, and we deliver service and value for that money we're deriving. It is a budget of staying the course. Councillor McPherson asked for that presentation. You know what? There's like 1.2% really that we can maneuver with. We had a shave at that tonight, and we've seen the implications. And I'd just like to put something in the CAO's here and the Director of Finance, because, you know, Councilor Brunet had mentioned, you know, the line about succession planning, and we saw the hit this year that we took with the rise in wages due to Bill 158, due to minimum wages. Take a quarter of that for next year and put that towards succession planning and build that in. A couple of the departments, the water, wastewater did that. So they're already doing that within the budget, and you know what, this is a challenge that I set out, that, you know, we try to do that, because we won't have that hit next year. That will be part of the base budget, but you know what, we overcame it this year, and I think we can be smart, and we can be strategic, and we can forge ahead, and then that will set us up for success. So, are there any councillor inquiries this evening? Are there any notices of motion? Are there any announcements? I have one. With the trade mission departing on Thursday, today marks our last scheduled meeting until we resume a somewhat regular schedule on Monday, December 11th, 2017. The Planning Committee will be held that evening, followed by the budget meeting on Tuesday, December 12th. There's no closed session items for this evening, so we're adjourned. Thank you very much.